So we are all about doing things by hand, working with what you have, but sometimes having the right tool for the job is worth its weight in gold, and that's definitely the case when it comes to shelling corn by hand.
So we've been growing corn for several years. We always do the Three Sisters method of growing, and so we grow corn, and then the beans trellis up the corn, and then the squash acts as a ground cover around them. And so by doing so, we are getting a few hundred ears of corn every year. And we were shelling by hand, and it would take a long time. It's totally doable, and especially if you only have, a few dozen ears of corn or something, shelling by hand can be a great option. But with a few hundred ears of corn, I got sick of it, and I didn't want to do it, and it actually kept us from eating a lot of the corn because it was just kind of a pain to take out and have to shell, and then after you shell it, you have to grind it. And so we just weren't eating that much corn or cornmeal. And so at one point, I just kind of got frustrated. Like, we were gonna have cornbread for dinner. I wanted to do it, but I just didn't want to shell it. And so I thought there's gotta be a better way. So I started Googling what options we had to shell corn. And that's when I learned about this guy.
Yeah, so this contraption here, it goes, if you search for it online, a few different people sell it. It's under a couple different names. I believe it's called the Pleasant Hill Grain Mill, and it's a corn sheller. It's kind of this mechanized, it's solid cast iron corn sheller. This is kind of a replica of a corn sheller from like 100+ years ago called the Black Hawk corn sheller, and I think that was like the original one. And there's still a ton of those out there today. They're really sweet. They're black instead of red. And those things are like built to last forever. These ones are probably built to last forever too. Yeah. But a lot of people on homesteads and small scale, corn growers still use the Black Hawk ones.
And that's actually
today.
where we started looking at used, like Facebook Marketplace and eBay, to see if we could find one of these kind of more original old school corn shellers, but we couldn't find one. So
they're out there, but we got this new one. It's the Pleasant Hill. It also goes under the name like the Maximizer corn sheller. Or probably the best option is Layman's. If you're familiar with Layman's, it's like a retail store.
We'll link below.
We'll link, yeah. But they sell a lot of awesome things. But they have this corn sheller. I think it's like $90. But yeah, essentially you feed in. There's like a hopper. You feed in a whole ear of corn with the kernels on. You turn the crank handle. It's got this flywheel, and then there's like this disc plate that spins on the inside, and it's got these little like fingers or spikes in there that are like just designed perfectly. They kind of wedge in there and just pry off all the kernels as this thing is spinning and kind of churning through there. And then it's got this awesome other feature where after all the kernels are off the cob and they fall into your box, then it pulls the ear, the like empty ear of corn, back out through it, and it spits it out the backside, and it lands in a bucket, and you're done, and you just keep feeding them in like that, and it can do like a ton more corn than you can do by hand.
We did a side-by-side test to see how many ears of corn he could do with this while I was hand shelling, and he did at least 10, maybe
10
12.
Or 12. I lost count in there.
Yeah, ears of corn in the time it took me to do one by hand. So, it's if you're doing a lot of corn, it really might be worth a good bang for your buck to pick up a corn sheller. Now, if you are doing it by hand, it's a really pretty simple, straightforward process, but you're just going to take the ears of corn, and I always find starting kind of at the outside, like the top, and working some of those free, and that's usually the trickiest part of it, is getting those first few corn shells, corn kernels off the cob. But then once you have a few removed, you can kind of push it off to the side, which is a faster process where you can kind of take off whole rows at a time and work those corn, shell that corn much more efficiently. But getting started takes some work. You kind of dig your fingernails into it initially, but just kind of pull it off the cob, and it will all come eventually. It just takes some figuring out.
After you do it a few times, you'll understand why we got sick of it after a while.
Yeah.
It, wears your thumbs down and stuff, and it's not the most fun process, but like we said, it's very doable. But yeah, this guy, just, if you do get one of these, generally you need some sort of like, a lot of people use just a solid wooden box to set it up on. It has kind of these mounting brackets, and so you mount it on some sort of box. We had this old wood drawer, and we used that. It's not quite thick enough to like mount it very well, so I just used some extra pieces of wood that I had lying around as like a shim to kind of get it to mount in there correctly. Depending on how heavy your box is, we also use some quick clamps to clamp it down to when we're using it, just so it stays in place. I will mention with your box too, like this one's probably not ideal because it's not quite deep enough for those like bigger ears of corn to like fit down in there, and for the whole mechanism where it spits the the ear out the back end afterwards. It doesn't quite work as well on our setup because of how deep the box is. So you probably want a box that's at least like a foot deep to work, optimally. But yeah, it's really simple to get it set up, and you just feed corn in, it spits it out, and it's awesome. And it's also a really great thing for kids too. Our kids love this thing when they get going on it. They're like mesmerized by the whole process.
For a few friends over, it's like quite the attraction.
Yes. Another thing that's pretty cool about the design of this is that the flywheel where it turns on the handle actually has like this V groove built into it that's built for like a belt. You could hook up a belt to this thing with an electric motor, motorize it, and like if you're really hauling and cranking out a ton of corn, that could be a really good option. The one drawback to like the design that I've seen, especially like on our scale where we grow corn that isn't super uniform in size, like we're small scale. It's not like a giant field of corn where every ear of corn is turning out the exact same size and length and shape and everything. Ours are kind of all over the maps. And so it does take some dialing in as you're putting the corn through here. Sometimes they pass through and it doesn't like catch, and it doesn't take the kernels off right away, and you just have to put it through a second time, and usually it works. But there is like this adjusting screw here that adjusts the tension of this hopper, and sometimes you have to adjust that as you're going based on the size of your corn. But really, it works pretty seamlessly. It's super efficient.
So coming from two people who are all about DIYing it, using the resources that we have, not spending a lot of money, I promise this has been one of the best investments that we have made. It has saved us a ton of time. And so if you are needing a way to shell that corn, we highly recommend looking into these corn shellers. So thanks so much for stopping by the farmstead today, and we'll see you next time.